Sequels have gotta be tough to make. I mean, how do you iterate on an established formula in a creative, unique way without losing the magic that made the original so special? Pretty much every sequel ever made has wrestled with this dilemma of creative liberty, and resulting games have had wildly different outcomes. Some stay so close to the tried and true mechanics of the original that they hardly feel like a new installment at all, while others walk so boldly into new territory that they barely even resemble the previous game. And in some very unique cases, we see both outcomes playing out almost simultaneously. Hi there, my name is Daniel, and I think Super Mario Bros. 2, both of them, are pretty creative. The year is 1985. Super Mario Bros. Had just taken the world by storm, saved the video game industry, and firmly established the platforming genre all at the same time. It was a success, to say the least. But while gamers across the globe were raving about this instant classic, the air behind the scenes was riddled with apprehension. Mario's creator, Shigeru Miyamoto, and his team at Nintendo knew that a sequel was expected. And the good news was, they wanted to make one too. But how do you follow up such an iconic, groundbreaking masterpiece? Nintendo had caught lightning in a bottle with the first game. Could they do it again? In today's climate, there is no shortage of sequels to look to for inspiration. But in '85, there was no script, no basis to work off of. Nintendo knew their next steps would be in the dark, and within that dark unknown, they would need to find a way forward that would bolster the legacy of their newfound hero. So, how did they do? Well, I think it's safe to say that Nintendo succeeded in the end. Mario has jumped his way across 35 years of adventures at this point, as well as what feels like every genre imaginable. Heck, if you're watching this video, you're probably a fan of at least one of those legendary titles. Yeah, Mario would land on his feet for sure, but the road to get there was strange, to say the least. Now, a lot can be said about this crazy rebranding on Nintendo's part, but for the full story, I recommend you watch the gaming historian's excellent video about the development of Super Mario Bros. 2. The gist is that Japan's original release of Mario 2 was a vastly different product than what the rest of the world received, and it all came down to a matter of difficulty and accessibility. But I know what you're thinking. Dan, I played the original Super Mario Bros. 2 earlier this year on my Switch, and I don't live in Japan. And you're exactly right, friend. Because just a few short years later, in 1993, the Japan-exclusive original was finally given to Western audiences as part of the Super Mario All-Stars collection under the moniker The Lost Levels. And to mirror its worldwide release, the Western version was actually given to Japan around the same time, with the title Super Mario USA. And thus, both Birdo and the Poison Mushroom were forever immortalized in the pages of Mario's lore. When I first heard the story of the Lost Levels development, I honestly thought it was hilarious, albeit a little insulting. Nintendo didn't think I, a Western gamer, was good enough at games to enjoy this? Now, I enjoy a good challenge, so naturally, I had to show these fools that they had vastly underestimated my abilities. And yeah, they were right. And I take back what I said. If the mindset in not releasing the Lost Levels in the West was that it would be more frustrating than fun for many playing it, I'd say their worries were pretty accurate. This game isn't hard. No, the original Super Mario Bros. Is hard. It's challenging and makes you earn your victories. No, the Lost Levels is a brutal, soul-crushing experience that will weed out all but the most determined of players before even reaching the game's midpoint. One of the biggest critiques among the game's initial playtesters was that while the first game was difficult to master, this one just felt downright unfair at times. And not only that, there are sections that feel intentionally designed to troll the player, like this one. It felt like a joke at my expense, and while that's definitely hilarious looking back, it didn't exactly equate to my definition of a good time while I was actually playing the game. Also, special shout out to this friggin' stage, which bounces you into the stratosphere and gives you absolutely no indication of when or where you'll land. Love it. But while the road itself was grueling, I did, after several intense hours, claim victory over Bowser. Of course, I'm also playing the Super Mario All-Stars version, which this time places game over checkpoints at the beginning of each stage, instead of just the beginning of each world like the previous game. And even then, my energy and motivation was waning fast by the time I finally took Bowser down. Like I said, I love a good challenge, but for me, the level of difficulty we're talking here was just a little much at times. The Lost Levels does offer something else though, besides just a brutal remix of the original. And that's the debut of Luigi's unique physics that have become an iconic part of his character ever since. I was genuinely surprised to learn that his floaty jump and slippery run didn't originate in Super Mario USA, but it actually started right here. And even though his differences from his older brother really just boil down to these two things, it's crazy how much of an impact they have on the overall experience. Luigi's vertical gives him easier access to areas in which Mario would usually need a running start to reach. But Mario's tighter controls make him much less of a liability than Luigi when it comes to sections requiring more precision. The Lost Levels created more opportunities for unique playstyles in the Mario series, but it was USA that truly took this idea and ran with it. The two aforementioned bros are obviously playable here as well, each inheriting the same basic traits set out in their Lost Levels counterparts. But in this entry, they're also joined by Toad, known for his speedy run and pitiful jump, and Princess Peach, sporting her now iconic mid-air hover. Each character comes with their own strengths and weaknesses, which each draw attention to various aspects of USA's complex stage design. Because oh my goodness, the stages in this game. The previous two titles had one simple goal for the player in each stage: move right until you reach the flagpole. It was so simple, in fact, that the game didn't even require the screen to scroll left at all. But this time, you're not just going right. You're going left, you're going up, you're going down, you're climbing stuff, riding on carpets, digging into the freaking mantle of the earth, carrying keys to keyholes while being chased by terrifying nightmare fuel, all capped off with a boss fight at the end of each stage. It's nuts! And honestly, so crazy to see such stage variety so early in the series. That being said though, I did feel that some of these stages were a little on the long side. One of the most impressive aspects of the Mario series over the years is how the developers managed to pack so many creative ideas into each stage without allowing them to overstay their welcome. Even within the more open, explorable 3D titles, the path to each goal is usually pretty short and sweet in a Mario game. Just long enough to bring the fun, but not so long that the fun is lost. And while this would even be true of the very next game in the series, I just don't think they had quite achieved this level of tight design in this entry. There's only 7 worlds in this game as opposed to 8, and each world only has 3 stages instead of 4. But even then, I still felt exhausted after finishing a world most of the time. There are so many creative ideas on offer here, but the trade-off is that some stages really felt like a haul to get through. But of course, I'd be remiss not to discuss USA's most iconic mechanic. Probably the first thing mentioned when this game is brought up in conversation is the fact that, unlike the rest of Mario's adventures, this one is not primarily about jumping at all. I mean, it kind of is. Jumping is still one of the main actions you'll take in the game. But importantly, the jump this time around primarily serves the game's true core mechanic, grabbing and throwing. One of the first things any Mario fan will notice in this game is that surprisingly, jumping doesn't defeat enemies. Rather, enemies are treated pretty much as platforms, and once you're on top of them, you can then pick them up and throw them. Doing so will likely then draw your curiosity towards these conspicuous red weeds growing out of the ground. And upon pressing the same button you used to grab that enemy earlier, you notice that it wasn't a weed at all. The ground hides all sorts of stuff in this game. Vegetables, POW blocks, Koopa shells, bob-ombs, and even these weird potions that create doors to another dimension where you can find super mushrooms. Cool? Needless to say, this single mechanic of grabbing and throwing items opens up a whole new world of possibilities, and it's the primary reason this title still feels so distinct from the rest of the series 3 decades later. Now obviously, this difference mainly stems from the fact that USA wasn't originally a Mario title at all, but in my opinion, that makes this game's influence on the rest of the series even more fascinating. I wouldn't be surprised at all if the mechanic of grabbing items and kicking them, which has become pretty commonplace nowadays in Mario games, was inspired directly by what we see here. So, which one of these entries was the right choice for Nintendo? Which one better accomplished its purpose and acts as the true, worthy successor to Super Mario Bros? I'm sure you can tell by the tone of this video that my opinion rests in favor of USA. But that's just my opinion. The beauty of each piece of art is totally in the eye of the beholder. And for me, the Lost Levels just didn't provide the experience I was personally looking for. But both of these games, the Lost Levels and USA, offer a unique, valuable legacy to the Mario series that can be seen in its core identity today. For instance, the first thing many people think of when they think of Mario is how wacky and imaginative his games are, a reputation that is absolutely epitomized by the bold steps into the unknown taken by USA. Without this title, we wouldn't have Shy Guys, Sniffits, Bob-ombs, Pokies, Ninjas, or Birdo. That's right, can't forget about Birdo. And then of course there's Wart, who gives Bowser a much-needed break in this entry and proves that the world can be terrorized by someone other than the Koopa King. But like I said in my last episode about Super Mario Bros., this series is just as famous for the depth of its mechanics and level of skill mastery available to players who truly sink their teeth into each game. Usually this mastery is forged in Mario's post-game bonus stages, and the Lost Levels essentially functions as an entire game's worth of bonus content for the original title. And fun fact, it was also the series' first game to include bonus worlds at all, so that's pretty cool. The Lost Levels is and always has been an experience for veteran gamers, designed to provide the ultimate test for their skills. And for so many people, that sense of accomplishment and skill mastery is the reason they love gaming. That legacy deserves to be celebrated just as much as the creativity USA brings to the table. And that's why I'm glad the Mario series has both of these games. The story of Super Mario Bros. 2 will always be the story of two vastly distinct titles. And I think that's great. I will never say that Nintendo misstepped with the Lost Levels and corrected their mistake with USA. Nor will I say that the Lost Levels is the true sequel and that USA isn't a true Mario game. Both titles are valuable to me personally, and their crazy development speaks so honestly to the challenge of moving forward in life. Making decisions is just hard sometimes, especially when the stakes feel so high. Today it might be just choosing where to eat dinner, but tomorrow it might be choosing a college, choosing a place to live, or how I'm going to invest my week. I'm sure it was so easy for Nintendo to play the what if game when reflecting upon these titles. What if we had just released the Lost Levels in the West? What if we were more confident in what we had made originally? Or what if we had just gone straight for the USA version instead and released that worldwide? I totally get it, because I do the same thing every day. But playing these games and seeing the value of both products has reminded me that there is beauty and joy to be found in many of the potential options I'm faced with each day. And what if it's not about finding the one single right choice at all? What if we could seek to find joy and build others up in whatever circumstances we choose, regardless of the specific nuances in the outcome? Let's try it. And as we move forward, let's celebrate the wonderful, unique lives we've been given. Hey there, welcome to the end card. Thank you so much for hanging out and watching the video. If you liked what you saw and want to support the show, feel free to follow me on social media. I've got an Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and I am learning how to use them. So if you want to stay updated with the show and my personal journey as I'm moving through this, check it out and give me a follow. Have an awesome day, and I'll see you next time.